Tonight on the Donlon Report, Donald Trump's ban on Facebook continues. A review panel says the former president severely violated standards, but did open a door to return, possibly within months. Meantime, Representative Liz Cheney in a battle over Donald Trump in the GOP, now saying the former president's language can provoke violence again, and it could cost Cheney her leadership post. Also, with homicide spiking this year in Baltimore, Maryland's governor pleads don't defund the police. The city's mayor calls for reimagining public safety. Who's right? The Donlon Report starts right now. Good evening. Great to have you with us. Well, are you surprised, relieved, outraged, disappointed? The Facebook jury has spoken, and Donald Trump will not be allowed back on the social media platform, at least for now anyway. Facebook has an oversight board. It's a 20-member panel that weighs in on content decisions, and that board today upheld the decision to block the former president. Facebook made that decision over concerns that then President Trump's words could incite violence and unrest after his supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6th. During the riot, in post, he called his supporters great patriots and described them as very special. The board agreed with Facebook that two of the posts that day severely violated the content standards of both Facebook and Instagram and encouraged and legitimized violence. However, the board had issues with the arbitrary penalty, saying as Facebook suspended Mr. Trump's accounts indefinitely, the company must reassess this penalty, basically calling for Facebook to decide the appropriate penalty for Mr. Trump within 6 months. Facebook issued a statement shortly after the ruling saying, in part, "We believe our decision was necessary and right, and we're pleased the board has recognized the unprecedented circumstances justified the exceptional measure we took." Mr. Trump weighed in as well, saying, in part, "Free speech has been taken away from the President of the United States because the radical left lunatics are afraid of the truth." The decision has renewed debate over how much control a private company should have when it comes to speech, especially one of the biggest platforms on the planet, reaching billions of people. And it has led to bipartisan concern about the power of big tech companies. Here's Senator Bernie Sanders, no friend of former President Trump's, from a podcast interview last month.
If you're asking me, do I feel particularly comfortable that the then president of the United States, could not express his views on Twitter? I don't feel comfortable about that. Now, I don't know what the answer is. Do you want hate speech and conspiracy theories traveling all over this country? No. Do you want the internet to be used for authoritarian purposes and insurrection, if you like? No, you don't. So how you balance that, I don't know.
Well, we got at least part of the answer to that today. Facebook's Oversight Board co-chair Michael McConnell told reporters indefinite penalties of this sort do not pass the international smell test. We are not cops reigning over the realm of social media. But they were today, and at least for now, Mr. Trump remains in social media jail. Let's turn now to social media expert Jim Anderson for more. Jim, first of all, you heard about all the reactions possible at the top there. What was yours to this decision?
Well, my reaction, Joe, is I think the Oversight Board actually aced its first big test. And I say that not because I agree or disagree with the actual decision. I think they took a very considered view. They made a judgment. People say, well, they didn't really make a decision. You look at the text of it, they very clearly upheld the ban. And then they went back to Facebook and said, look, this whole idea that you've created this concept, you invented this concept of an indefinite ban, that's not good enough. You need to do better. So, sometimes, one of your indicators of success is that you've made people both happy and sad. And I think they did that. They angered people clearly, but I think they did some really good work here.
Well, you did hit on something I heard a lot today, and that is that they didn't really decide anything. Having said what you did, though, who were the winners and losers?
Well, Donald Trump is a loser for the time being on this. Clearly, he wanted that access back, and not just for Facebook, but that would create a tremendous amount of pressure on Twitter as well. It'd be very difficult for Twitter to continue to sustain an indefinite ban if he's gotten his Facebook account back. Now, of course, Twitter's not regulated or governed by the Oversight Board, but certainly the public pressure would ratchet up on that. I think the Oversight Board wins and Facebook wins because every bit of criticism that goes to the Oversight Board is a bit of criticism that's not actually going to Facebook. So I think you're going to see some really interesting releasing things. And as you said in the open, within the next 6 months, that could very well change. Facebook is going to be forced to come up with some standards. Is it an indefinite ban? If it's not indefinite, how long does it last? And so there's effectively another bite at the apple here within the next 6 months.
You brought up Twitter, Jim. Where are they on this? Is their ban permanent?
Well, they've said their ban is permanent. I'm sure they're breathing a sigh of relief because the last thing they want to do is wade into this controversy if they don't have to. So I think for now, Twitter sits on the sidelines and they let this process play out. If and when former President Trump gets his Facebook account back, I think all eyes shift over to Twitter.
So there's a lot of talk, Jim, about how much control these companies should have over speech. Do you anticipate any federal action as a result of what we're debating here?
I think there'll be discussion of federal action, but you know how hard it is to get things done. You've got Democrats and Republicans both angry at big tech, but for different reasons. I think there's probably some progress to be made on antitrust. I'm skeptical about Section 230. I will say one thing that hasn't been talked about today that I think could be and should be is the Oversight Board, as you mentioned, has 20 members. Well, they say that full staffing of the Oversight Board would be 40 members. There's actually no upper bound. What would happen if conservative organizations, which have had a tremendous success in history of advocating for more conservative judiciary members, what would happen if they said, okay, big tech is a big part of our life now. If we're going to have things like the Oversight Board, we want to make sure our points of view are appropriately represented. I think that's actually a huge opportunity for conservatives to say, I want to affect the composition of the Oversight Board and make sure that a diversity of viewpoints includes conservative views as well.
So one thing, clarify on the way out here, Jim, this decision has been kicked back to Facebook. So is it up to Facebook and not this panel to make the final decision in 6 months? And what do you think ultimately happens?
Well, so to be clear, the decision was upheld. The Oversight Board said that Facebook's decision to ban former President Trump is upheld. But you said Facebook, when you banned him, it was indefinite. That's not good enough. You can't have a term of indefinite. You need to say it's either permanent or it was for a period of time, and therefore set some rules, unless Facebook just comes back and says flat out he's not coming back, in which case it is upheld and he's not coming back. But I think you'll see Facebook come back with something on in terms of a timeline, and then maybe we get kicked back to the Oversight Board again.
But the next move is Facebook's.
The next move is Facebook's.
All right, Jim Anderson, Social Flow CEO. Great information tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Let's get another perspective now. Welcome in Edward Stringham, president of the American Institute for Economic Research. Edward, this isn't a question of whether companies can do this. They're private companies. We know they can. The question really is more, should they?
Right, exactly. It's their platform. They curate it. On the other hand, they've got this immunity, Section 230 of the Internet Act from 1996, where they say they have a lot of things that they can't get in trouble for because they're not curating. They're not like a newspaper. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it's very clear to me, at least, it seems like they're curating. They're saying certain views, certain people can be on there. They referred to the president as in violation of the Dangerous Persons and Organizations Clause. So the fact that the president, and I'm not a fan of what happened or him specifically either, but the fact that they could just choose who is classified as a dangerous person and then censor that person, I think that brings a lot of worry. The big tech could really see who can talk with the American public.
Well, let's show you a little bit more about what Congresswoman Liz Cheney said today. She's been rocking the Republican vote recently. We're going to talk more about her fate in a minute. But on this topic, she wrote in an op-ed in the Washington Post, quote, "There is good reason to believe that Trump's language can provoke violence again. Trump is seeking to unravel critical elements of our constitutional structure that make democracy work." What are these companies supposed to do, Edward? I mean, there's so much content out there. What's the answer, in your opinion?
I mean, it's increasingly clear that if you agree with them, they're going to give you a green light or maybe even promote your stuff. If you disagree with them, they're going to be either putting your stuff lower down in their thing or temporary bans or permanent bans. I would say if they're really worried that the specific former president is going to incite violence, maybe they could say, well, we'll review his tweets and they'll come out, or Facebook posts in this case, and they'll come out a day later or an hour later, the way they used to have a delay on live broadcasts, if that's their real concern. But the idea that they can just decide to permanently ban somebody who was very politically important and now he doesn't even have this platform anymore, I think it's really quite something that people should be wary about these big tech platforms.
You think this is doable for these companies, though? And again, I realize, as we said a minute ago, it's a big job. I mean, we've got Russian bots. You've had hearings just a few years ago about misinformation. There's talk of election meddling. There are millions of fake accounts. I mean, what is the line that these companies should and shouldn't do?
Oh, it's a huge problem, and I think actually they're part of it. I think that they're there to get people riled up, to manipulate people using algorithms, and so they could say, "Oh, no, we're objective." But I do think that they profit, and they're part of the whole thing. They've moved well beyond the news aggregation service that some of the early news sites used to provide. They've moved beyond the, hey, let's just share pictures of our cats and babies.
Those were the days.
Yeah, and now it's all political.
Yeah. Yes or no, do you think Facebook lets the former president back on within 6 months?
I'm not a betting man, but yeah, I would bet so. I think it would seem odd that many months after this bad event happened that they would keep this permanent ban on. I think it would look like a bad image for them.
All right, that's Edward Stringham. Edward, thank you very much for your time. He is the American Institute for Economic Research president. Thanks again. The CDC reports U.S. birth and fertility rates dropped to a record low last year. The number of U.S. births dropped 4% in 2020 compared to 2019. That's twice the average annual rate of decline since 2014. It means the U.S. birth rate is officially now below replacement levels, meaning more people die every day than are being born. Joining us now to discuss the economic implications of this and the potential cause is our friend, the cow guy, Scott Shellady at Ag Optimist. Interesting that we would talk to a money expert about birth rates in a cow suit, but Scott, we know you can handle anything. Let's start with that, because the joke was that because of the pandemic, we'd probably see a baby boom. What happened?
You know, I don't know. We talked about it too in our circle, and we were wondering more about how many divorces would come of it. But as it turns out, I mean, the government locked us up in cells basically. So I guess I'm not surprised to see that the birth rate outside of prison is the same as the birth rate inside of prison. So that's really what it feels like to me. But the dirty little secret here is what everybody needs to know, and there's more parallels to this than one can imagine. But you know, our birth rate needs to be positive so that we're basically, you know, bringing up new consumers. Sure. We have new customers coming to the table. That's why we like immigration. That's why we need that population to expand, because we need to have more customers. And a great way to look at this is, look, if you look at Japan, they've had a negative birth rate for a while now. And around 1990, their stock market hit an all-time high of roughly 40,000. And it's languished the last 30 years between 10 and 25,000. It's at 28,000 as we speak right now. So, I mean, a negative birth rate or less than the replacement value means less customers, right? And that's going to make your economy struggle. So, I mean, that's the dirty little secret. Nobody knows. As long as your population is expanding, your economy will most likely expand as well.
So what do you think has changed, Scott, in the last 6 years that we've seen declines in this? As you mentioned, I mean, we're seeing record numbers in employment, in the stock market. I mean, things were sailing along until the pandemic, but now, not just now, but people apparently are waiting to have kids, or they're having fewer kids. What decisions are going into this economically? Are they saying, well, look, I'm maybe worried about losing my job. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to afford a bigger house. What all is involved in this economically, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there's some pretty bad messaging. If you go back over the history of planet Earth, this is probably the best time that you want to be alive. It's the safest and most prosperous. But I think over the last 5 or maybe 7 years, I think the younger generation has got a different message. And the pandemic obviously did not help that. I mean, I don't know about you, but the day I turned 16, I ran out and got my driver's license. Mm-hmm. We routinely interview people that are 28 and never had one. So something's changed along the way where they don't feel as they need to have kids right away. They might buy a house first, then have children. They do everything a little bit differently than we did back in our day. So I think the messaging's a little bit different. I think that the way they grow up has been a little bit different. But still, I think that the birth rate in prison is probably the same as the birth rate out of prison. I think that's how most people would say that.
I think it's probably a little higher outside of prison, but I'm not sure. I'm not positive on that, Scott. Okay, before we let you go, what do you think this means? I know you touched on it, economic growth-wise down the road, and how does this impact businesses and their hiring? What does it mean, say, for example, for an older worker? Is this good news for them? Adapting to the changing demographics, I guess.
Yeah, you could say yes. I mean, unfortunately, it could. I mean, what's good news to you? If you're 98 years old scooping ice cream at Dairy Queen,
no, I don't want to do that.
No, I mean that's not good news, right?
No.
I mean, so yeah, it probably says that there'll be a job for you if you want one,
right?
But I don't think that it's good for the overall economy. You need to be, that's one of the basics. Is law and order and an expanding population are the two basic things you need. And if we don't have the expanding population, that's dire. And again, I can only go back to a great example of a Western economy like Japan's, very similar to ours. They had a high of 40,000, roughly 40,000 in the Nikkei around 1990. And for the last 30 years, it's bounced between 10 and 25,000, and it's at 28,000. It hasn't gone near that record high since. And they have been on a steady decline since then, as far as birth and death rates go. So they've been in a negative, they've been contracting. Right. So that's the problem. That's a great example. You're not bringing any new customers. That's just like CEOs saying, we're not going to make our people come back to these big buildings and these canyons of Wall Street and Chicago. Well, you're not going to have any customers for those businesses either then. That's a small microcosm of the same thing.
All right, how about that? Economics and sociology, all from the Cow Guy tonight. Scott Shelley, it's always good to see you, the Cow Guy at Ag Optimist. Take care.
All right, to see you.
Quick update now on consumer fitness company Peloton as we head to break. The at-home cycle and treadmill company is recalling all of its treadmills after reports of dozens of injuries, including the death of one child. CEO John Foley released a statement saying, I want to be clear, Peloton made a mistake in our initial response to the Consumer Product Safety Commission's request that we recall the Tread Plus. We should have engaged more productively with them from the outset. For that, I apologize. The recall affects about 125,000 Treadmill Plus machines. In Baltimore, a war of words is brewing between Maryland Governor Larry Hogan and Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott. The back and forth began at a news conference held by Governor Hogan after a brutal attack on two Korean women was caught on tape in West Baltimore. The video shows a man tackling and then hitting both women with a cement block.
So number one, we have to get tougher laws. Number two, we can't defund the police, which is the mayor's plan. We got to invest more in our police. And number three, we have to have a prosecutor that's willing to prosecute crimes.
Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott fired back at the governor, tweeting, rather than relying solely on status quo solutions and MAGA talking points, how about actually meeting with me to discuss violent crime, gun trafficking, or restarting the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, as I've asked before. Governor Hogan, I'm ready when you are. Earlier this year, Maryland Attorney General Marilyn Mosby announced that the city would no longer prosecute drug possession, prostitution, trespassing, and other minor charges. Violent crime dropped 20% from March of 20 to March of 2021, according to the Washington Post. But a recent stretch of homicides, including 7 over the weekend, has pushed the total number of homicides this year up to 107. That's up 17% compared to the same time last year. So is Baltimore's new stance on cutting prosecutions of minor crimes working, or is it leading to more serious crimes? For her take on this, now I want to welcome in independent journalist and friend of the program, Nancy Rommelman. Nancy is back. It's good to see you, as always.
Joe, thanks for having me back, even though this is a pretty devastating conversation we're about to have.
Yeah, it is. So tell me what's happening in Baltimore and how it compares to what you're seeing in a number of other cities.
Well, it's interesting because when you compare it to Portland, which is something we're very familiar with, you have a similar situation in terms of a mayor not really willing to get tough on crime and a DA that doesn't want to prosecute. But the difference in Oregon is that you also have a governor that it wants to defund and doesn't want to do a lot of things. At this, in Maryland, you've got Hogan, who is an interesting guy. He tends to go his own way. He's almost a libertarian in that way. Mm-hmm. And from what I've been told, I don't know if I can say this on the air, but it's become sort of a three-way pissing match. Between the mayor and the DA and Hogan, including that, we did have a lot of homicides. And, it's funny, you said 107. I was looking today and I clicked and it's actually up to like 108. Mm-hmm. So it's just like literally when you refresh your browser. It's he came out to say this, and then he kind of got castigated for this. It's like, well, why didn't they come out and start talking about some solutions?
Well, for what it's worth, Nancy, you can say that. I can't, but you can. So we'll let you get away with it. So I do want to ask you about this defund situation, though, because it's obviously part of this conversation we're having there in Baltimore. And I know we're hearing about this nationwide, and it is sort of a turn of phrase there. It's not necessarily doing away with the police, as some have said. In some cases, clearly supporters want to shift money away from the police, not all of it. And that's kind of where this line is. I mean, should they be spending more money on affordable housing and drug treatment programs and after school programs and other things that they see as more important in the community than policing? Is that where this ends?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, like, I don't disagree with some of the things that what is her name, Mosby, have done. I mean, I think small crimes, like, we shouldn't spend our time prosecuting that, like someone with a very, very small amount of drugs, let's say. But when you defund the police, you have to do it smartly. You can't just say, okay, we're just going to take money away and we'll just create this other thing that they as yet have no experience in creating. If you take money away from the police, you're going to take money from training. Why don't you, like, reallocate the things that you have the police do? Like, should we have the police making, like, traffic stops for a taillight? Probably not. It's probably not a good use of time and money. But I do think, and just for this show tonight, Joe, I spoke to a friend of mine who is a former Baltimore police officer, and I asked him that if I gave him the magic wand, what he would do. Would you like to know what he would do?
I'd love to.
Sure, I have it right here. He said instantaneously, I would aggressively prosecute gun offenders. I would increase the penalty for illegally possessing a firearm. I would focus on top areas where violence is occurring, an immediate action plan after shooting to touch those who would be the ones most likely to carry out retaliatory violence. And I would use state police as a presence in tourist areas and move local police back into the communities. That is something you hear a lot from police officers. They'd really like to police in communities and get to know the people that they're policing, because that makes a really, really big difference when you know the people. Yeah,
and it sounds like a lot of it, though, too, he's pointing to is the prosecution end of this that we've heard so much about.
That's right. Now, I don't know if she's declining. I mean, in Portland, he's declining to prosecute, crimes that are committed during the act of protest. I don't know if that's exactly her game, but violent crimes need to be prosecuted. We had was it 7 murders over the weekend, right, including someone who a conservative, an Orthodox Jew, and there it's big news in the media in Israel. And a friend of mine who is Israeli said, stuff is bad in Baltimore when you make the Israeli news cycle.
Right.
It's too much.
Well, the governor also said police have to do better, but we all have to do better as citizens as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's leave it there and move on here to another subject, Nancy. New guidance from the CDC for summer camps and kids this summer. Pretty buttoned up, to say the least. Let me just play for our viewers here a little bit of this. According to the CDC, key prevention strategies at summer camp: wearing masks at all times, even outdoors, except when swimming, no close contact or indoor sports, no group gatherings or events. At least the kids can take their masks off while they swim. And Nancy, you weren't too happy about this, to say the least, tweeting, "Why are we listening to anything the CDC says at this point? Humans have instincts for a reason."
That's right. Look, let me ask you a question, Joe. Where were you when, last March, when COVID hit? Where were you, in Chicago?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't something inside you and your friends say, time to go inside? Kind of knew before we knew what was going on. We got to go inside. And then, as the summer moved along and we understood we really got to take care of our olds, we got to take care of people with, comorbidities. But the rest of us, we got to kind of get back into the world. Okay, it's almost a year from then. It is time to go outside. It is time to not wear a mask outside.
If you've been vaccinated.
I've been vaccinated.
Well, that's true, right? Okay. Yeah.
It's time to let the kids play. That's summer jail. That's not summer camp. Okay, that they were. And also the CDC, the messaging is so confusing at this point. I'm sorry. They have made themselves obsolete.
You think
you
think we've got it from here? You don't want or need any more guidance?
I don't, actually. I mean, unless things change drastically, and I pay attention to the news. I am going out and living my life. I'm having people coming over now. I go outside without a mask. when I go inside, people that want me to wear a mask, of course, I'm going to do it in businesses. I'm not going to be, a creep. But no, it's time to move on. It's time to let go of the mask.
Yeah, I know. We're all trying to figure it out because I think we have gotten into the habit of wearing it, and now it's hard to get out of the habit of wearing it. You know what I mean?
Joe, you can do it, Joe.
Yeah, we're vaccinated, and yeah, we can. Hey, some great also brownie recipes on your Twitter feed as well, I saw.
Okay, I highly recommend. Go to my Twitter feed. It's at Nancy Rom, NancyRomm. The thing about that brownie thing, watch this video. This is one of the best videos I have seen this year.
It is mesmerizing.
It's mesmerizing. It's funny. And you get to make some amazing brownies. So I'll have made them by the next time we speak.
Yeah, I only watched the first couple of minutes. I can't head down those rabbit holes, Nancy. I have too much to do in my day.
Okay.
Always good to see you, independent journalist in front of the program, Nancy Rommelman. Take care.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Earlier today, the Biden administration announced that it supports waiving intellectual property protections for the COVID-19 vaccines. U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai announced the administration's stance, saying this is a global health crisis and the extraordinary circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic call for extraordinary measures. The administration believes strongly in intellectual property protections, but in service of ending this pandemic, supports the waiver of those protections for COVID-19 vaccines. Removal of those IP protections will help expedite production of vaccines in developing countries, something they sorely need. We have the latest now on the trial of Derek Chauvin. Defense attorney Eric Nelson has requested a new trial. And in that filing, Nelson cites a number of claims, including jury misconduct and other issues involving the court itself. There are also questions about one of the jurors and a picture circulating on social media. The photo of juror Brandon Mitchell at the March on Washington shows him wearing a shirt that says, "Get your knees off our neck." Is that picture enough to overturn the verdict? Let's bring in attorney Randy Zellen now to discuss. Randy, let's break this down in a few bites if we could, starting with the main points in the motion. His lawyer says the pretrial publicity impacted Chauvin's right to a fair trial. There was also the issue of a change of venue. Walk us through at least that part of it to start.
Absolutely. Mr. Chauvin, love him, hate him, watch the video, don't watch the video. He was entitled to a jury that was fair and impartial. And the argument was, with all of the publicity attendant to this trial and the attention that it got, that it was impossible for him to receive a fair trial by a fair and impartial jury, particularly in that venue. Move the trial someplace else where perhaps it wasn't so important, where the city wasn't going to burn down. Maybe move it to Mars. But the point is that the pretrial publicity deprived him of his ability to have a jury that would fairly and impartially just look at the evidence and make a decision based solely on the evidence, whether or not his guilt was proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Haven't some of these issues already been addressed by the court, Randy?
Yes, but that is why God made appellate courts. So at some point, an appellate court is going to look at, okay, did he receive a fair trial? Was the jury truly able to be fair and impartial with all of the pressures on them that Minneapolis would burn, the protesting, the arguing, the threats, the violence? Could they actually not worry about that being on their shoulders if they actually acquitted him? Should the trial have been moved to another place where, again, the city wouldn't burn to the ground if the jury actually acquitted him?
What are some of the other allegations in this motion, Randy? I know that we talked about jury misconduct, but there was talk, at least that I saw in this motion, that the jury may have felt threatened or intimidated or felt some race-based pressure during the proceedings, and also that they failed to adhere to instructions during their deliberations. What happens with all of this and moving forward now? Does the judge rule on it himself?
Well, the judge will rule on it himself. I would imagine that will be summarily dismissed, though it's very interesting in this case because you will remember that the judge made a comment in the face of Representative Waters' really ill-advised, ill-timed, and unnecessary comment, which certainly could have almost been viewed as a call to violence. And the judge was so unhappy about that the judge commented that could be grounds for a reversal. Do I think the judge will be the one to do it? No, but certainly that was telegraphed to the appellate court because that was just additional pressure on the jury. Don't worry about the evidence. Don't look at the evidence. Just understand that if you acquit this man, there's going to be violence and the blood will be on your hands. That was way out of bounds.
Big picture this for us, Randy. We know it's very difficult and unusual for a judge to overturn a verdict because of the work the jury has done. Do you think this goes anywhere?
I don't. It's, as you just indicated, judges are they're loath to overturn a jury verdict. I think ultimately the evidence in this case is overwhelming. The video, and there are those of us who will say that evidence doesn't speak for itself. I would respectfully disagree in this case. The video absolutely, positively speaks for itself. Hold your breath for 9 minutes and 25 seconds and tell me how it pans out. But remember, also in this case, you have the matter of the juror. Did the juror violate his oath when he promised the judge that he had not participated in any rally or demonstration concerning police brutality? The pushback from the government here will be he was attending a Martin Luther King rally. Right. That was not a police brutality rally, and accordingly, the juror did not violate his oath.
Randy Zellen, head of the criminal practice group at Wilk Oslander LLP. Randy, good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Always a privilege. Thank you.
The House GOP is weighing a possible vote to remove Representative Liz Cheney from party leadership. Cheney, the third highest ranking Republican in the House, was one of 10 representatives to vote to impeach President Trump in January, and she continues to denounce the former president's false claims of a stolen election in 2020, and it's upsetting many of her fellow party members. Washington correspondent Joe Khalil joins us now live. And Joe, the Congresswoman came out with an op-ed in the Washington Post this afternoon. It almost sounded a bit like she was conceding.
Well, yeah, a little bit, Joe. It was basically an indictment of her own party. She said, we're now at a point where we got to self-reflect and figure out, are we going to be a party of conservatives or are we going to be a party of a cult of one, dedicated to Donald Trump? Throw up an excerpt here, just a little bit of what she said in that Washington Post op-ed. She says here, the Republican Party is at a turning point, and Republicans must decide whether we're going to choose truth and fidelity to the Constitution. In the immediate wake of the violence of January 6th, almost all of us knew the gravity and the cause of what had just happened, and we witnessed it firsthand. Joe, she ended that op-ed basically, as you said, conceding, saying that she's willing to go down and lose her role in leadership if it means standing up for what she believes.
I think she's got real problems. I've had it with it. It's, I've lost confidence.
And that was Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy there, hot mic moment. But he, along with Steve Scalise, basically leadership here, already expressing the fact that they have lost faith in Liz Cheney. So for her, Joe, it's certainly going to be an uphill battle at this point if she wants to keep her leadership seat. We may see a vote to remove that position from her as early as next week. Joe.
That vote would not be, it would be private, we should point out, right? How would that work?
It would be private. It would be a vote at their conference meeting, totally anonymous. It'd be up or down. You decide, do you want to keep her in leadership or not? And following that, if they remove her, they would then vote on her replacement. So that's how that would work. And again, we've already heard from the leadership here in the party, aside from her, already actually backing other people to replace her. So not a good sign for her, but again, she says that she's going to go down with this ship, Joe. All
right, Joe Khalil live in D.C. for us. Thanks, Joe. A vote to remove Cheney from her position could have a serious impact on the House GOP. Joining us now to discuss this, former chief policy advisor to Mitt Romney. That's Lanhee Chen. So, Lanhee, it's always good to see you. This is a party that doesn't like cancel culture. Are they canceling Liz Cheney?
Well, Joe, here's the challenge. Liz Cheney definitely has a point of view. She has a perspective. I think, by the way, in the long run, it's the right perspective for the Republican Party to have, which is that it cannot be tied to a single person alone. It has to be about growing the conservative movement, figuring out how the party can be more appealing in the suburbs where it's lost a ton of ground over the last couple of election cycles. Where I live here in California, The party has to get more competitive, as an example. So I think her perspective is the right one. The difficult part of this, though, is if you're Kevin McCarthy and you're trying to essentially run the House Republican Conference, you have to figure out, do I have a leadership team that has the confidence of a majority of people in my conference? And right now, the current constitution of it with Liz Cheney there doesn't. And so he's got a job to do as well. I think we got to understand he's in a difficult position, too.
That is Liz Cheney's job, basically, there is messaging. And if she's not on the same page with other leadership on the message, that could be problematic. I did want to share this, though. As we know, Cheney survived a vote earlier. It was in February on her leadership role. I believe the vote was 145 to 60 or something like that. That was after she voted to impeach President Trump. I looked up a quote from the time, Lanhee, and it came from Kevin McCarthy. He defended her at that time, saying Liz has the right to vote her conscience, and at the end of the day, we will all get united. So what changed?
Well, quite simply, the politics here are very, very treacherous. And what you're seeing is, for example, the continuing influence of former President Trump, the way in which he still has an influence over members of the Republican conference who are there in the House, but also, frankly, amongst base voters. And again, what it comes back to is this is a very unique and difficult challenge that Leader McCarthy has right now. I think he's done his job very well, given the challenges he's got in terms of trying to bring together people who have different opinions. But at the end of the day, if the majority of people in his group, in his conference, do not have confidence in Liz Cheney, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for her to continue. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's the dynamic we're seeing now.
Is the message here, Lanhee, that if you're not with former President Trump, the party isn't with you?
I don't know that that's the message at this point. I would say that I think the message is that former President Trump is still a significant factor in the party. I think it's clear that until and unless people like Liz Cheney and others around her are willing to speak up, she really is one of the few who have been willing to express a point of view that's contrary to what most others have in the party. So we need more people and more voices if this is going to be a true debate to sort of voice their point of view and their perspective, because right now it really is Liz Cheney kind of swimming alone. And unfortunately for her, I think she's probably not going to make it out of this particular battle in one piece.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to use another metaphor, it feels like the train's leaving the station and she's still on the platform. But how do you think this vote goes down next week, Lanhee? And by that, I mean, will we just ultimately get the final count? Will we find out where these House members stood on the vote?
I don't know if we're going to see individual results, but I think we will know overall. And I think, unfortunately for Cheney, her days as in her position are numbered.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. One final question before we let you go, Lanhee. Is this the bellwether moment for the party? As she said, they're sort of at a crossroads. And what does this mean for the party moving into the election cycle next year?
Yeah, look, Joe, I think these next several months are crucial. And to define the Republican Party, to define sort of what kind of room there is for disagreement within the party. I've always believed, as you know, in a bigger tent party, one that has more points of view, is more inclusive. And I think that part of the conversation is one we're going to see play out over these next several months and years leading up to the 2024 presidential election.
All right. Lanhee Chen, former policy advisor to Mitt Romney. Thanks for your time. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Joe.
Democrats are hoping to convince Justice Stephen Breyer to retire while they have control of the White House and the Senate. While President Biden says the choice is up to Breyer, other Democrats believe Breyer's retirement would be best for the party and the court.
There is no question that Justice Breyer, for whom I have great respect, should retire at the end of this term. I mean, my goodness, have we not learned our lesson? Joining me now to discuss is law professor Michael Higginbotham. Michael, we'll talk about the timing in just a minute, but two of the last three justices have died, Scalia and Ginsburg. How unusual is this to sort of nudge a justice to retire like this?
Well, it's good to join you. Thanks for having me on. Anybody can nudge a justice. They can encourage them to leave. But as the Constitution indicates, justices serve for life, and it's up to them when they leave. So Justice Breyer will make a decision. He hasn't indicated publicly that he's interested in stepping down, so it's his call. He'll make it when he's good and ready. But there is a window of opportunity over the next several months up till the summer of 22 that could be advantageous to President Biden and Senate Democrats.
Right. Talk a little bit more about the numbers there, Michael, because it does make sense, and the time is sort of now, and if not now, soon.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier when you have a Democrat-controlled Senate in terms of confirmation. And the risk, of course, is that in 22, you could have the Senate change to a Republican control, and in 4 years, you could have a Republican president. So the risk is that if you stay too long, that you will have a more difficult confirmation process in replacing Breyer, or that you will have a Republican make the appointment, or that you will have to stay on, sort of be in hold, like Justice Thurgood Marshall was in hold for 12 years, and like Justice Ginsburg, who passed away.
Right. Justice Kennedy retired during the Trump administration. I'm curious what you think about an impact, if there is one at all, on Justice Breyer. Do you think any of this is anything he's thinking about at all?
I absolutely think he's thinking about it. If you look at his history, he worked for Teddy Kennedy. He was on the Senate Judiciary Committee as a legal counsel. He knows the ins and outs. He knows the ramifications of this, and I'm sure it's on his mind.
In the end, do you think he retires?
I think that his health is good. He seems to enjoy what he's doing. But I think he'll take into consideration the political aspects, and I suspect that you will see him step down at an opportune time over before the summer of 22.
Interesting. Before we let you go, just quickly, we haven't heard much, and we heard a lot about it at the time, expanding the court. We haven't heard much about it since. Do you think anything comes out of that?
I think it does. There's got to be a price to pay for what Senator McConnell did with holding up the nomination of Garland, not even giving him a hearing. There's got to be some consequences, and also for the hypocrisy of appointing and confirming Amy Coney Barrett during a presidential term and a week before the presidential election. Got to be some consequences to that.